Hey guys, welcome to podcast 2 of the year, where what I'm doing for the start of the year is to re-go over each of the principles in my book, and how my thought process has changed over the last year. As I said in the last podcast, if you're not changing things, fairly frequently in your opinions and updating stuff as you go, you're probably not learning and developing. So in this series, doing such that. And the next one was move well to move often. So this is a quote that was taken from Gray Cook, from the founder of the Functional Movement Screen. Move well to move often. In the book, I talk about a number of different things, like you need to have a high level of movement quality before you get people loaded. Looking at does the program have squat, bend, push, pull, twist, and rotation work, tempo work, etc., and like what kind of programming designs that you want to look at. So moving well to move often, I've kind of changed that around a little bit. It fits in a little bit more with the next point, which is individualization. But moving well to move often, we really need to start looking at not just making sure the exercise is done to textbook standard, but to make sure that it's done to that individual's own unique biomechanics, anthropometrics, proportions, etc. The next thing to also talk about is how moving well is a matter of goal and therefore a matter of intention. So let's dive into the first one. So with making sure people move well in terms of their body composition, the key thing that I really want to get across is that there is no unique universal moving well. So but what I mean by that is someone who has like a short femur and long tibia versus long femur, short tibia are going to have very, very different looking squats, but it's going to be moving well for them and what they can actually do. So we need to, as coaches, look at our clients' individual anthropometrics and analyze the exercise. Is it moving well for them? And there's a couple of tools that we can use to do that. The first one is looking at moving well. How much stimulus versus fatigue does the exercise actually give to the client, and is that relevant for their goals? So stimulus fatigue ratio is something that's talked about by Dr. Mike Israetel in all of his work, basically, which is really, really useful. Basically, what you want to get out of most exercises is a high degree of stimulus with a low amount of overall residual systemic fatigue and also localized fatigue to areas like joints and stuff like that. So an example of that would be, say, a barbell bench press. If you do the barbell bench press, yes, it will train your pectoral muscles. It can help them get bigger. But for some people with some joint issues in the shoulder, AC joint, sternoclavicular joint, etc., it can actually lead to quite a lot of problems. Plus, the high amount of load that gets expressed through the body means for some people, it may not be a good option. Flip side of that would be something like an incline dumbbell bench press with the arms in the portion of the clavicular head, in line with the clavicular fibers of the pec major. And this exercise will have lower joint strain, free range of motion throughout the whole body, and therefore potentially lead to more pectoral hypertrophy due to the fact that you can do more volume of that exercise because of its lower stimulus or higher stimulus to fatigue ratio. So when we're looking at different clients, we need to make sure moving well takes that into account. It takes into account their biomechanics and then what kind of residual fatigue it gives you over time. The next one is then looking at intention as a quality of training. So intention as a quality of training being moving well to achieve our goal. So if your goal is hypertrophy, your intention in training should be a little bit different to your intention of training if you're going for maximal strength, if you're going for fat loss and systemic fatigue. All these different training modalities require a slightly different tweak to get the most sort of training, the best training outcome. So, and that's one quality of moving well. So if I'm in a training phase for myself, for example, and I'm going through a strength building phase, I do go between strength and hypertrophy phases as my main forms of training. I enjoy strength training. It's basically why I do it. So if I'm doing a bench press for that, it'll be controlled eccentric, pause on the chest to dissipate the stretch shortening cycle on the first rep, and it'll be an explosive concentric contraction as possible. I don't really care about what muscle's doing it. I want the bar to move away from me as fast as possible with full intent to move it fast so I can recruit as many high threshold motor units, increase my rate of force development, rate coding, and all these other neurological factors that relate to strength. I'll also take much longer rest breaks in the strength phase if I'm doing really, really heavy stuff because I want to get like up to 98% kind of recovery between sets. If I'm doing the bench press from a hypertrophy standpoint, it's going to be a little bit different execution there. So some things will be the same. It will be controlled eccentric. It'll be a pause on to dissipate the stretch shortening cycle in most exercises, so I can increase muscular load and tension. And then I'll push up with a controlled concentric. It won't be slow, it'll be controlled. And then each and every rep will have a pause on it versus a set for bench presses in the strength phase where only the first rep has pause. So what the difference is between that is the intention is very, very different between the two. My rest periods will also be slightly shorter as well because I want to get that kind of pump, that cell swelling, that kind of higher level of muscle damage, which are all being shown to be some kind of indicator of hypertrophy. We don't know which one's going to be doing the job at what time. It's impossible to measure, but we may as well try and chase it in our training if we can. And that there is a really interesting way to address movement quality. Look at really identifying the movements that look at really identifying what the goal is and what the intent behind that drill is, and then optimizing each rep for that. Another example would be a squat, and this kind of touches on both parts of movement quality. So a squat you can do it in a number of ways: high bar, low bar, front, Zercher, even though Zercher sucks. Kidding. No, Zercher does suck. Zercher squat, double kettlebell front squat, as I said, low bar, pause squats, cyclist squats, 1/4 squats. There's 1,000 different options there. There's a very big difference. You have a high quality squat for the same person that looks very different versus when someone's being quad dominant versus someone's trying to lift as much load as possible. So for that, what you want to look at is someone's trying to get quad dominant and quad strengthening. Their movement initiated with the knees traveling forward first. They were trying to keep a vertical torso as possible. They're trying to have their knees go over their toes as far as possible to get full range of motion of the quadricep muscle. Feel a stretch, pause at the bottom, come up by squeezing the quads, contracting them, versus trying to squat for maximal strength, where it's a few commonalities: big breath in, brace, etc. But what they'll do is they'll initiate a movement with a combination of knee and hip break, depending on the variant that they want to look at. And they'll go down, control, and then use the stretch shortening cycle to actually explode out of the bottom of the hole, because they're not given the prize if you're trying to lift the most weight for sitting in the hole for a period of time. So guys, hopefully this gives you a few more ideas on movement quality and how you look at it in your clients. There's a number of things we could touch on. We could literally touch on every single exercise that you could do. In the individualization podcast that's talking tomorrow, I'm going to talk about how we individualize this a little bit more based on some of the stuff from the Postural Restoration Institute, looking at sternocostal angles, respiratory synkinesis, and other things that we can do to improve the training experience and really individualize the sessions, not from a program design perspective, but individualize them from an in the gym perspective that very day. Cool guys, thanks heaps for listening. Speak tomorrow.